Jill here with Sirius Taurus Moon, and we are continuing on with the Mula Nakshatra and Galactic Center, square Saturn and Neptune. We talked about the mass migration of planets to square Saturn and Neptune before they ingress into 2 whole months of being ruled by Saturn. And the good thing about it is that the mass migration of planets, which is Mars, Sun, Venus, Lilith, Mercury, um, with the moon arriving every now and then, okay? Twice a month to meet them, um, spending at least a week in that, okay? In conjunction to this mass planetary migration. Um, the good thing is that the mass migration ruled by Saturn begins from the square to the sextile. So this is where we're going to be seeing the mass migration moving from the square to Saturn and Neptune to the sextile, but they will also be moving into the conjunction with Pluto. This is why December and January, and later we're going to see that with February and March, because all of these folks are going to one by one cross the border. There's going to be a new border with face recognition or the lack of that they're going to have to cross with Saturn, Neptune on the world degree. So there is very fascinating trajectory happening in the sky where almost all the planets but Jupiter and the moon one by one are flocking together like birds, and they're all crossing the thresholds of the bigger planets, of the outer planets, of the slow-moving planets. Um, and I call it the mass migration of planets. Now, we can assume that because we're talking about personal planets meeting outer planets, it's also a mass migration of people. Okay? And unfortunately, um, particularly around, both around the sextile and the square, that mass migration might be crossing the threshold. Unfortunately, with the applying Mars to square Saturn and Neptune, we have masses of teenagers jumping off high buildings into their deaths because they were bullied by their peers, but that probably has something hidden. Okay, kind of like something more like satanic abuse or threats regarding that, or even astral activity that we don't see. The other day I was traveling by bus and there was a mom with a neurodivergent child, and that neurodivergent child talked about something that bothers him, and it was very evident that there's something going either in the astral or technological that is attacking that child, while the parent is trying to treat it from a point of view of, well, we can't go here if you will make problems. Well, you have to behave, you have to this, and kind of like, well, no, the child is being either raped, attacked, okay, if something's going on with the neurodivergent children, and we can't treat that like, oh, the child is neurodivergent, so we try to elegantly teach them to, to not give up on them and to elegantly teach them to behave themselves. They don't need to behave themselves. We need to understand what's attacking them. Um, in adults, we can see it with what is considered psychiatric, but in children, it's particularly challenging because children speak. They say, these people are bugging me, or this is happening, or they're bugging, or they're harassing her, or they're this or that. And then people are just kind of like don't know what to do with that information and overwhelmed, and like, well, but to go see that person or to go there, and even one of the things that the child was saying was, well, if you give up on me so easily, then okay. And I was just standing there and I was like trying to set intention for a benevolent intervention for that child for in the astral, because I didn't even know, like, let's say I tell this person, yeah, they're being attacked. What how am I going to help us stop this attack? How is she going to listen to me? And all within, people going about taking off at the next station and going about, and how is that even going to be delivered without sounding like a thousand things that mother has been told that were not true because she's raising an neurodivergent child. So there was a lot of things going on there. It was pretty obvious that there's something happening to the children, and that can be the masses of children. And then another lady began to talk to me about her scolding somebody who was bullying her daughter or a child or a son or whatnot. And she was not answering, she was answering very important things, but not to the question. And it was kind of like everybody's saying very right things that don't connect. Because in the case of that child, it wasn't a visible person, but somebody that was doing something in another plane that is very real. And yet, in the more traditional routes, that child would also be tortured, this time under the guise of um, either idealizing that they're going to have a really hard life because they're going to be a shaman or something, or, and I don't disown shamanism, but it's definitely, what's not happening is that child being granted safety and freedom as a child. And in fact, that's a lot of children that were taken to places of satanic risk, particularly by Mormon cults, were children that had certain abilities, and or they were seeing something, and then the family called a priest or someone, and then they were ritually abused. So this is the part about this mass migration that um, that we also have to take into account, because it can be death by invisible circumstances. Okay, the utmost expression of the square with Saturn can be this. So it's not going to be death for everyone, but a lot of people are going to also be, it's happening around in my first house. So I have been sensing death and the passing of people, and receiving a lot of miraculous healing along the way. Okay, I'm not just um, and we also have to take into account that in some cases the miraculous healing is, people try to imitate the miraculous healing to bait or to try to control people and so on and so forth. Now Venus is sextile in Pluto, while the moon is exactly squaring Pluto and in conjuncting Venus. And this sextile from Venus to Pluto is a harmonious agreement that that we basically are having before Venus will conjunct Pluto. So now we are having after the grand water trine is coming to an end, we're gonna have the moving of mass migration of planets into the square with Saturn and Neptune, and some of them are not gonna make it through that square, and we have to also understand and take that into account. And some of them are going to simply grow from that square. We're going to have a reality check on the myth of each planet. Another thing that came about as an energy reading was that nothing, what aligns with love that is actually loving, is not that which tries to control or manage. Okay? Because the essence of that was rape in childhood, in infanthood, in ritual, in dream state, in astral. And people could be even dissociated from those things, whether they are the offenders or the recipients. Or not dissociated, but this is where that managing others in a way that's not in their favor, or trying to manage others supposedly in their favor. Okay, now here is the thing. Children that went through ritual abuse, they do need the boundary setting to the programming. Okay, and here we have to be discerning when one is that and when one is the managing that is actually using healing as a bait of control. Very challenging, very intricate. The children that were deprived of childhood, they do need to meet their non-erotic needs in a way that is also not a bait to control them, and they do need to meet their needs. And the people that will be most attuned to those needs are in many ways also children that were deprived of other things. And this is where we have a very challenging juxtaposition. Okay, this is why psychodynamic psychotherapy is dynamite science. The you know, it's not just the training and the certification, but the innate nature of the calling. Ascendant 29 degrees Sag. So square in Pluto, square in Neptune. Okay, we talk about hypnosis, and hypnosis can bring back memories and also create dissociation. Hypnosis can be used to heal and also to perpetuate trauma. For example, one of the things that I had undergone um, had to do with very likely an unauthorized attempt with hypnosis that I was not, and it's also the case that children in dissociation, okay, there are a lot of intricacies there. And then we also deal with the fact that the healer or therapist themselves are being monitored, handled, puppeteered, and I'm being very tender with that. So that topic is coming about as well. It also to do with channeling, okay, with working with healing energy, where the channeler doesn't always know what the other person experiences with that energy. And again, I was given the naive, okay, because beyond that naive, there are also layers where things are more conscious, and um, okay, there are people that are simply conscious about the fact that they are a perpetrator towards their patients, and they even pride themselves about that. Um, and we have to take into account that most people that are treating these cases, they're treating both the offenders and the victims. Most people. Because when an untreated victim goes untreated, the susceptibility of them becoming offender is very high, particularly because of the right to exit violence. Okay, because he's not. A lot of people that are ritual abuse survivors had to go through forgiving themselves for people that they had to kill or that they had to rape, um, and that's a part of the exodus from ritual abuse, or the people that were using their, let's say, if they were going through the astral attacks. For example, when I was severely attacked, I don't know who was taking my consciousness or my appearance to attack somebody else, where it would look like it was me and it wasn't, but to the other person, they would experience me as the offender, and I would be in a state of dissociation, raped at that time. and vice versa. Okay, so and then there are the people who completely, either they were so mind controlled that they went into a psychotic state being the therapist and threatened my life in the physical. And even I had testimonies of people that later avoided me, that told me that they were thinking to explain something in a way that I will understand. And these people did not even understand the full meaning of that sentence because they themselves were also survivors. And I don't think they even know it was of ritual abuse, not just pedophilia. Now, when some of those people run the places that are supposed to provide treatment, and they could be convinced by psychologists and healers that they can be a case of somebody faking did because they did a mess in the apartment. Of course, people that have did, they are still battling with the mind control, and they couldn't acknowledge the facet of energy because probably that would mean so much to them that they're dissociating from that. And this is where the entire field was not allowing recovery. Just upon the onset of extortion calls, where everybody wants everybody to ask for the Epstein lists, but forget about the handlers. All the while, there are people who are running Nazi trade platforms that think that to murder a woman is okay, and it will always have abundance of excuses around that. And they usually are also the trafficking ring that would place the trafficked girls as a third party. I think we pretty much got the gist of what the mass exodus, mass migration of planets will be like with Uranus at the end of Taurus. And at first they're going to inconjunct, then they're going to trine when they go through Pluto. Um, I think the ascendant Scorpios are particularly suffering. Yes, because it's both their seventh house, and they may have been trying to even eliminate the third party only to realize that they could have been trying to eliminate their very infants. Oh, I got mail.